security guard who said where they were going, right? And as soon as he's about to say...
Harry's rage didn't arrive all at once. It crept in like poison, slow and burning. The kind that tightens your chest before it ever explodes, because this time it wasn't a tabloid headline or a faceless rumor account. This time it was a man Harry knew, a man who had known his wife for years, a man who had seen what Harry was never meant to see. No cameras, no photographs. Very sweet to do this under the radar. That single sentence detonated everything. It started exactly like that, not with shouting, not with smashed plates or slammed doors. It began quietly, almost politely, the way the worst truths always do. A slow tightening in Harry's chest, a heat that didn't explode but spread inch by inch through his body, settling somewhere deep where doubt lives. Because this wasn't some anonymous comment floating on social media. This wasn't a headline written to bait clicks. This was a voice he recognized.
A taxi, and there's flashes coming from every direction. They're up against the car, just taking pictures.
A man who had been inside his life, inside his marriage. A man who had watched things unfold from the front seat while Harry believed he was seeing the whole road. That single sentence didn't sound dramatic. It sounded casual, almost careful, and that's why it was lethal. Very sweet to do this under the radar. Sweet, under the radar, words that shouldn't exist in the same sentence as a marriage built on honesty and shared trauma. In that moment, something inside Harry shifted, not snapped, shifted. And once it moves, it never goes back to where it was. Those were the exact words spoken by Mr. Ellis, Meghan Markle's longtime former driver, during what was supposed to be a quiet, forgettable interview on a low-profile streaming channel. No dramatic intro, no flashing graphics, just an elderly man sitting stiffly in a chair, hands folded, eyes heavy with something that looked a lot like guilt. I drove Meghan to places Harry was never allowed to know about. The clip didn't look dangerous. That's what fooled people at first. No polished studio, no dramatic lighting. Just an older man, stiff in his chair, hands folded like he was bracing himself, eyes carrying the weight of something he'd held too long. Guilt, maybe, or relief. When he said it, he didn't smirk. He didn't dramatize, he just said it. I drove Meghan to places Harry was never allowed to know about. Never allowed. Not forgot to mention. Not didn't think were important. Never allowed. That phrasing alone sent a chill through anyone who understood power dynamics inside a relationship. The host froze. You could see it happen in real time. Viewers froze too. And then the internet did what it always does when it smells blood. The clip was ripped, reposted, dissected, slowed down, subtitled, blasted everywhere within minutes. Ellis didn't hedge. He didn't say, allegedly, he explained. GPS disabled, interior cameras shut off, routes chosen to avoid surveillance, night trips, last-minute calls. Destinations never logged, never billed, never spoken of again. Always framed as safety, always justified as protection. But then came the line that changed the temperature of the room. Safety doesn't mean secrecy from your own husband. That's when the story stopped being gossip and started feeling like something else entirely. According to Ellis, these trips often happened when Harry was away or conveniently distracted. Not charity events, not friendly dinners, underground garages, hour-rate apartments, private entrances, dead suburban roads where headlights were the only witnesses. He said she was always nervous, always checking her phone, asking him to circle the block, to keep the engine running. And when he asked questions, when curiosity crossed an invisible line, he was gone. Fired. No warning, no explanation, just erased. Years of loyalty reduced to a termination notice. When the interview ended, it didn't need accusations, it didn't need names, it just needed time. And it didn't take much. Inside the Montecito mansion, less than an hour later, that quiet poison finally erupted. Harry didn't lose his temper the way people expect. It wasn't theatrical, it was raw. Phones shattered against walls. His voice broke. Staff disappeared into corners of the house like ghosts. One sentence kept repeating, stripped of dignity and control. Why didn't I know? That question wasn't for the media. It wasn't for Ellis. It was for the woman sitting across from him later that night, scrolling on her phone as if nothing had changed. When he slammed the tablet down and the interview replayed silently between them, something flickered across her face. Surprise, calculation, fear, gone in a second. What is he talking about? She asked, voice smooth, practiced, private work, personal projects, industry meetings, girls' nights. The words stacked neatly, rehearsed, ready. But Harry wasn't listening to the words anymore. He was listening to the gaps, turning off GPS, lying to security, underground garages at midnight. When he pushed back, she pivoted. Pushed back, paranoia, trauma, attacks. Tears arrived on cue, perfectly timed, as they always had. For years, that routine worked. Turned questions into cruelty, turned doubt into betrayal. But not this time. Later, alone, Harry did something he'd never done before. He checked. Schedules against logs, logs against timestamps, messages against vehicle movement, and there they were. The gaps, hours erased, edits layered over edits, a life carefully rewritten in real time, two versions of reality running side by side. His chest tightened, his hands went numb, and in that moment, he made a decision that terrified him. He hired someone, not to attack, to understand. Rumors move faster than facts, but patterns started forming. Neighbors remembered Tuesday nights. A barista remembered whispers. A hotel clerk remembered a fake name and a sentence that wouldn't leave her head. Not my husband. And then the photo appeared. No caption, no source. Just an image dropped into the world and left to breathe. An underground garage, a hoodie, a cap, a sealed brown package changing hands. Not affection, a transaction. When Harry saw it, he didn't rage. He went quiet. The kind of quiet that scares people more than shouting ever could, because silence means the math is being done. He didn't sleep. He replayed every moment he'd been told he was imagining things. By morning, resolve had replaced shock. The investigator called, patterns don't lie, and then a name surfaced, not loudly, not publicly, quietly, again and again. Andrew, not the caricature, not the headlines. A man who existed in margins and private networks. A man whose involvement explained the secrecy, the stand-downs, the exclusion. When Harry asked her directly, she didn't deny it. She deflected, too quickly. She stood up, folded her arms, said he was spiraling, but he wasn't. He was finally seeing clearly. Staff started talking, NDAs cracked, alternate transport, security dismissed at specific windows, visits masked as logistics, still deniable, still devastating. Then the call came from the UK, older, colder. A warning, not a threat. Be careful what you uncover. Some secrets don't just destroy marriages, they destroy legacies. Back in Montecito, control slipped. She tightened her circle, took calls outside, rescheduled meetings, moved like someone who knew time was running out. And then she was gone. No note, no explanation, just time to reset. Andrew vanished too. Flights canceled, associates unreachable. In that silence, louder than any denial, Harry understood the truth. Not a single scandal, not one shocking revelation. He had been the last to know. And once that settles in, it doesn't just change how you see your marriage, it changes how you see everything. The house felt different after she left. Not emptier, stranger, like a stage after the actors walk off but the lights stay on, exposing every scuff on the floor, every mark that was never meant to be seen. Harry moved through the room slowly, touching nothing, noticing everything. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was accusatory. Every corner seemed to whisper reminders of conversations that now felt staged, reassurances that rang hollow in retrospect. He replayed moments he once dismissed. The sudden phone calls that pulled her away mid-sentence. The way she'd angle her screen just out of view. The insistence that certain meetings were too sensitive to explain. At the time, he told himself it was pressure, trauma, the cost of being hunted by cameras and opinion. Now, stripped of her presence, those memories rearranged themselves into something colder, something intentional. Staff avoided eye contact. They spoke carefully as if every word needed approval before leaving their mouths. Harry noticed how people reacted when he entered a room now. Hesitation instead of familiarity, caution instead of warmth. They knew more than they'd ever said, and suddenly he understood why no one ever warned him. Because when you warn someone who doesn't want to hear it, you don't save them. You lose your job. The investigator sent another message, not evidence, context. Names connected to names, favors overlapping favors, quiet introductions made years before Harry ever entered the picture. Nothing explicit, nothing illegal, just proximity, timing, opportunity, the kind of web that doesn't need a center because every strand reinforces the next. Harry stared at the notes for a long time, not because they shocked him, but because they didn't. They confirmed what his instincts had tried to tell him and what he'd been trained to ignore. He thought about how often he'd defended her publicly, how many interviews he'd given where he positioned himself as shield and sword at once, how many friendships he'd strained, how many bridges he'd burned, convinced loyalty meant silence and love meant belief without proof. The realization didn't make him angry, it made him tired, bone-deep tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying a story that was never yours to begin with. Outside, the media circled, sensing blood without understanding its source. Speculation exploded, but Harry didn't engage. No statements, no clarifications. The absence of his voice became its own headline. People noticed. They always do when the person who once spoke the loudest suddenly stops. And in that vacuum, others felt brave enough to speak. A former contractor reached out. Then another. Small details, each insignificant on its own, together forming a timeline Harry couldn't unsee. Requests for alternate drivers, instructions relayed through intermediaries. Don't loop him in. That phrase appeared more than once. Him. As if he were an obstacle, not a husband. Late one night, Harry sat alone with a glass untouched in his hand, scrolling through old photos, smiles frozen in time, arms wrapped tightly, faces pressed together as if closeness alone could prove authenticity. He realized how often he'd mistaken intensity for intimacy, how easily passion can mask control when you want it to mean love. He hadn't been deceived overnight. He'd been guided step by step away from his own perception. When the investigator called again, his voice was careful. Still no smoking gun, still no moment that could be dragged into daylight and survive intact. But the conclusion was clear. Whatever existed between her and Andrew wasn't accidental. It was maintained, protected, actively shielded from him. Harry thanked him and ended the call without ceremony. There was nothing left to ask. He didn't need more proof. He needed acceptance. The next morning, he walked the grounds early, the fog still low, the world quiet enough to hear his own thoughts. For the first time in years, they weren't drowned out by someone else's narrative. He thought about isolation, about how subtly it had been woven into his life. Family portrayed as threats, friends labeled unsafe, doubt reframed as betrayal. He hadn't been weak, he'd been isolated. And understanding that shifted something fundamental inside him. By the time the sun fully rose, Harry felt different. Not healed, not resolved, but awake. He knew the story wouldn't end neatly. There would be denials, counter-accusations, strategic silences. He also knew the truth might never be publicly confirmed in a way that satisfied anyone. Some truths aren't designed for exposure, they're designed to teach. As the day unfolded, messages came in he didn't answer. He wasn't hiding. He was choosing not to perform, not to rush into defense mode, not to rescue someone who had never intended to be rescued. For the first time, his loyalty shifted inward. That night, alone again, Harry stood at the window and watched the lights of the city flicker on. Somewhere out there, stories were being written about him, about her, about secrets and scandals and blame. He felt detached from all of it. The real story wasn't about what she'd done or who she'd seen. It was about what he'd lost while believing, and what he'd finally regained now that belief was gone. He understood something then with startling clarity. The most devastating betrayal isn't the lie itself, it's the way it trains you to distrust your own mind, and reclaiming that trust isn't loud. It doesn't come with confrontations or headlines. It comes quietly, in moments like this, when the noise fades and you realize you're finally thinking in your own voice again. Whatever came next, public fallout, private reckonings, silence or storm, Harry knew one thing for certain: he would never again be the last to know.